Hey, it's Kellen, and today you guys are in for a real treat. I have a international traveler, international serial entrepreneur. You can see him on YouTube at the Nomad Capitalist. You can see his book on Amazon, Nomad Capitalist. He is really showing you how your life does not have to be defined in one area, one country. Andrew Henderson, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be with you. I love that.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to be with you. And in full disclosure, I binge watch your stuff as someone who represents, influencers and whatnot. I say this guy's stuff is going to blow. Now, it may take a second Trump or maybe even, worse, Kardashian presidency, but people are flocked to your stuff. I mean, you'll be a million plus YouTuber. I just see it in the very near future. Because I love everything you have going on. I'm going to tell the people, Andrew, when I say serial entrepreneur, he left America with selling a swimming service business, the broadcasting company. I mean, he made his money. You can go to his page and see, but I really want to go into the deep because you're very controversial with, even in your book, you're not a fan of the US. You've given up your citizenship. And I know, but I want the audience to know where did this all just start? Was it like one thing? Was it one too many like violence and you're like, I can't do this. I'm going to be next on the chopping block. Was it that one thing that just made you say, I got to get out of here?
Well, I appreciate the kind words. For me, the very early days that planted the seed were 11 or 12 years old. My father says, just out of happenstance, and I don't think he planned to say this, but he's just telling me, he says, listen, I think there were some kids around me who their parents were kind of telling them, when you get older, you're going to take care of us. And my dad said, listen, we've worked hard so that you won't have to do that. We don't think it's your obligation to take care of you. We don't believe in this thing where you owe us. Okay. Nobody's owed anything. And he said, listen, if where we live is not where you're best served, you should go to another city, another state, another country. Even he said, you should go where you're treated best and build your own legacy, build your own family, build your own life. It took me a while to fully implement that. But for me, it's been a baby step process. It started about 13 years ago. I started traveling, and I almost immediately started but even as a kid, we did a little bit of international travel. I noticed things were different in other countries. But as an adult, I started noticing interest rates are higher in certain countries than others. People do things differently. Certain things are more efficient. What I started to realize very quickly was there's no perfect place. There's no perfect ideal. There's no perfect culture. And that really, to me, the best thing is to cherry pick. And I think this about everything from countries all the way down to restaurant service, right? I mean, like, why can't we just all go and see what people are doing best? Now, we were just in Mexico, and they have these little hooks to like hold all your stuff, or they'll bring like a coat tree to put your coats on next to the table. I'm like, why doesn't everyone do this? And you know why they don't do it? That's how we do it in Serbia. We don't do it that way in Australia. Why not? If it's best, you should do it. And so for me, it's been a gradual process of realizing, where I can go and be treated best all around the world. And so, I didn't just wake up one day and renounce my citizenship. It was going and living overseas full time. It was having banking all around the world. It was having business structures all around the world, having multiple citizenships, having, all these different things. And I think just, action begets action.
Mm-hmm. And I know you are, you've read Tim Ferriss, and you mentioned that in your book. And when you start traveling like that, how weird are you to your friends? Because it's almost like saving money, in middle school. What do you mean you're saving money? Spend the money. If your parents gave it to you, they'll give you more. How was that action of, your friends locally from Ohio and in America saying, man, what are you doing?
I went to school in Ohio. When I was 18, I left. My parents had wanted to move. I went with them. I kind of knew I wanted to start a business. I did the whole college thing for a year or two just to kind of tide me over and kind of not have to say, hey, I don't want to go to college until I got some business up and running. And so I didn't really keep a lot of friends from high school. I just talked to one actually 2 days ago, but very rarely do I talk to them. But I have friends, and yeah, it's kind of weird. Now I have friends now I've had for 10 or 15 years, and they just get it. It's not their thing, but they get it. And sometimes we'll meet up in Hong Kong. They'll come for my birthday. They'll come to Mexico. We'll get together. I'll invite them to different places. But here's the thing I've learned. I mean, success is not common. Success is weird. And, the more I've been successful financially, it becomes harder. And when you add in this element of, traveling around the world, living in different places, giving up your U.S. citizenship. I mean, I just went out with my wife the other night with a bunch of friends, and the guy asked me, "Where are you from?" I don't know how to answer that question. And I try and have like a kind of a cute answer, and it's like I still don't have the perfect answer that satisfies everyone. But you know what else? I mean, here's what I've learned. If you've got a multi-million-dollar income, that's also going to be weird to most people. All right. We've had about 12 ultra high net worth clients in the last year, more than any other year. It's about 10-12% of our clientele. That's $30 million and up, and most of them were in the hundreds of millions, or in one or two in the billions. They've got to have high level friends, and they don't have very many of them. And so I think that success isn't common, and it's just something you have to adapt to, no matter which way that you're going to be unique.
Okay. And that's, the money conversation, when you start making money and your friends are like, "Hey, how much do you get?" I learned a long time ago, don't talk about money. To people, you don't need to talk money. If it's not the CPA or whatnot, there's no need to say, on this, we made X amount of dollars, because it breeds jealousy or competition of, some sort. So and this is for the young entrepreneur listening who, whether it's crypto or, whatever the latest thing is, they're making money. What is your advice to them when they start making money? Because, you tend as a young person to not think of these things, but what advice would you give when you start making, let's say, your even first $10,000? Should you go and wave it around like you're some rapper and say, "Hey, I've made my first 10,000, you guys should make it too," because, you haven't even paid, any type of tax, or, you don't know what
right, and that's the thing, right? I mean, as a kid, I was very political, and I was very much a libertarian, and taxes are too high, and they should be very low. And it's great to do this thing where you just kind of, pleasure yourself to these kind of ideals. But when it first hit me, and when I first started making some real money, all those, it's like I almost forgot that what was theoretical at 15 years old was now real. I owed, $50,000. My advice to someone would be a couple things. Number one of the things that I think benefited me, it was very awkward when I was 21, 22 years old, but I've always had friends who are much older than I am. And so, I mean, literally I'd be 21. I was hanging out with 40-year-olds sometimes. And I think what that did was it helped me because I had a different perspective. I think the challenge I see with a lot of people who are young is that, there's a drive in people to become successful, I think often to fill something. For me, it was, you wanted to get girls. I mean, I was not really the kind of guy who, in my teenage years who could just go up and talk to women. And so, you wanted to solve that. And so for me, it was like, let me accomplish something. I think that a lot of things drive people. And I think that when you get some level of success, there's a certain cockiness that comes in. And so for me, it helped. I mean, I still went through this. I was not perfect at this. But it helped me a little bit to tamper that by having people who were older, because I think it was Dan Locke who did something where he went to like a conference, and the guy came out on stage and said, "You're all effing poor." Mm-hmm. And here are guys who are making hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a year. You're all poor. Because you know what? What's helped me even be humbled is sitting with a guy who's got $1 billion and thinking whatever I've done is nothing. And that's kind of that's something my parents also taught me. I have this very kind of Midwest American Protestant upbringing, be humble, don't get too excited. And I think that, it's very easy to go out at 24 years old and be like, "Hey, I'm making 150 grand a year, or I'm making 300 grand a year." I mean, I see it. And the reality is, I mean, whatever you're doing, there's much more to do. And I think that if you want to take it to the next level, you have to believe there is a next level. And you're not going to believe there's a next level if you think that you're, the hottest thing going. When I got out of my zone and started hanging out with people who were making $5 million a year a number of years ago, things opened up and I started to become more like them because I got rid of the idea that, I'm the top. So that's my advice.
But what about, even if you do it perfectly, you stay humble, you stay quiet. What's funny is when we lived in New England, I was told, you got to meet this guy. You and him would mesh so well together. He bought his whole family BMWs, and he basically at 13 started building websites. Nat King Cole and all these people were like his clients at 13, right? And I'm like, I should meet somebody. And he's a cool guy, humble guy. But I should meet him because the whole city will talk about you and say, hey, this guy bought his whole family, BMWs, whatnot. How did you deal with that? Because I'm sure you've had those things where, I know your dad was an entrepreneur too, but how did you deal with, the rest of the tribe or the people around you saying, hey?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think maybe I have a very unique situation. I think we all have pros and cons. I mean, the pros in my case were my parents, my father in particular was entrepreneurial. They took care of themselves. They didn't expect me to do that for them. And the rest of my family, I mean, we never had the big, kind of Italian, 27 people come over for Sunday dinner kind of thing. It just wasn't us. And so I never really got that call. I think setting boundaries is very important. I think that's something that was a downside of mine. You've got to be really careful who you let into your space. And I think that for me, having a certain humility, and being told like not to get too cocky and always keeping that in my head to this day, to where I don't celebrate accomplishments as much as I should even. But I think that was helpful, but you have to set boundaries to not let other people take advantage of that. There's a difference between humility and let's letting everyone tell you that you're terrible, you owe them. And that's kind of part of my theory. You don't owe anyone anything. I'm a big believer in charitable giving. I don't know that everyone who lives the, low tax lifestyle that I do agrees with that, but I believe it's important. But I want to help people who most need it. I'm helping, with orphanages and people with developmental disabilities in emerging countries, and, animals in emerging countries, and wildlife and that kind of stuff. Those are my causes. I like to go to the people who need it the most. And the people who need it my most aren't my uncle who's sitting around on his couch. I don't believe it. And so for me, that's the paradigm shift. I don't believe that just because someone has a certain title of your family member, they're entitled to more than anyone else. And if you can't set those boundaries, if you're going to let people, guilt trip you, you're going to have a real hard time getting ahead, because your customers could guilt trip you. Your audience could guilt trip you. Your friends, your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, whomever. If you don't have those boundaries, people are going to walk all over you. And I can tell you that's happened to me, because I did have weaker boundaries and people noticed. And so, it's a one-word sentence. It's no.
Yes, it's no, or go talk to this person because they handle that for me. We have clients who they say, I don't talk money with anybody, and I don't talk my schedule besides my wife and Kellen. And that's the service that we love to offer, right? So have those guards, but you don't even let, leaving America, people guilt trip you because you got a lot of flack for saying, I don't want to be an American citizen.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think it was attributed to Winston Churchill. I mean, if you're throwing rocks at every barking dog, they'll never get anywhere. Here's what successful people do. They don't have regrets. They don't look back on the past. They make the best decision at the time available to them. And that's what I did. Here's the other thing. You know what? Again, to sit with some of the people that I've sat with in the last year and in the last several years, we have a conference coming up. Our first live conference in several years. We have probably tomorrow, we're going to sign with a president of a country. He's coming because he wants to talk about what he did in the country. If you're hanging out with president, and again, I don't mean to say this to be cocky, but if you're doing that, you don't want to go and listen to people who don't have a clue what's going on. If someone wants to have a conversation about, the policies of who should be able to leave their country and where should be able to go and all these different things, that's fine. but just to have someone who, has no understanding of how things work, making comments, who cares? And again, I think that's the price of success. People don't understand it. And, it's amazing. I grew up around it, not, the multi, 8 and 9 figure and 10 figure levels. I didn't grow up around that. But, I always realized if you're really successful, people are going to come after you. They're going to smear you. They're going to sue you. They're going to do all kinds of things. That's what it is. You just have so many things going on that some bad things are bound to happen. Who cares? And so I think the most aggressive, it's kind of made my philosophy more aggressive in the sense that I don't have that much sympathy for they go out, politicians go out, we got to save the middle class. No, you know what? We all went to the same schools. I went to public school. And we all have the same opportunities, where I come from at least. How come some people are alcoholics at 35 years old and have a lot of problems and are, trying to find, temporary jobs, and some of us are doing, the exact opposite. So I think what's made me it's really for me clarified the distinctions between people. I like encouraging people to win. And if people don't want to win, I don't have much time for that.
And I think that's a difficult thing, especially when you're getting into it, because the number one thing, my wife is finishing her last weeks of fellowship. So, and I've known her 18 years. She's known all the crazies, right? And people say, you're so lucky. And I say, wait,
yeah, right.
We're so lucky because what? She works 100 hours a week for the past 6 years while having 2 kids. We're so lucky because you put in the work. I don't like that word. I'm sure you've heard it over and over. You're so lucky. I mean, when are you going to get your merch so you can, have, I'm not lucky, you're just unlucky or something,
Listen, you know what else I've learned from these really high level people that it's just a great continuing lesson in humility is there's class in and often just not responding. They just stay above the fray. And eventually they're just above the fray and they surround themselves with winners. And, so I don't want to go out. I mean, you asked me, and so I'm telling you my thoughts on it. But it is frustrating for people to say that you're lucky. And here's what I'll say. It's not even just hard work. I know people who are working very hard. They're hustling, they're grinding, but they don't have the mindset in the right place because everyone they're hanging out with in my world, they're hanging out with the digital nomads down in Bali. And listen, I've got multi-million-dollar people that I'm working with and helping who live in Bali. Nothing against Bali, but it does attract, in some levels, the guys who say, hey, you know what, I can live on $2,000 a month, so therefore I will work as little as possible to get to that $2,000 a month. And so if you're hanging with those guys, you're going to think that's what's possible. If you're hanging with people making millions, you'll think that's what's possible and that's what's expected. And so I think it's just a reflection of the world people live in. Again, I've divorced myself from that in that, right now I'm in Malaysia. I walk outside. Other than people who come up and say, hey, I love your YouTube channel, nobody really knows who I am. I'm not part of the political dialogue, and I get to be distanced from it, and I just get to be left alone. I don't have to be surrounded by this negativity where if you have money, you're evil. Because yesterday I did 8 in the morning till 1:30 in the morning, and I don't need to do that.
You're so lucky.
I could retire. I don't. I live in Malaysia. Right? I live in Georgia. I live in Montenegro. I live in Colombia. It's not too difficult to get by. I could just draw down on the interest every year. But I do it because I'm on a mission. And I think, and again, most people are never going to understand that. And so you can't pay it any mind, I think.
And you're so lucky to work those hours. I can hear somebody say, so do you even look at your troll type comments? Because, I've seen influencers want to jump off the bridge and they're pretty big. They're like, somebody called me ugly. And you're like, okay, you just made, $100,000 last week. What are you talking about? Do you even look at those things?
I think you have to be careful with that, and I hear you. And I think there's some part of that thing. Hey, I just made $100,000 last week, and so here's what I can tell you. By the way, that guy didn't make $100,000 last week. 1,000% guaranteed. I'm in the business of high net worth people. Winners want other people to be winners. Period. End of story. And it's really been humbling for me to hang out with so many people who are successful. By the way, not everyone we work with has 50 or $100 million, but there's been a growing number of them. It's so humbling because they're not doing it and they're not reading it. And if they are reading it occasionally, they're like, that's stupid. I have looked from time to time. I generally don't. I have a team that handles it. I think that looking from time to time has helped strengthen me to where the point is like now I can deal with it better. Because when you first start out, it is difficult. But one of the things that I've done is I've just said, you know what, we're going to set a boundary. In fact, one of my team members just sent me something. They said, "Yo, you'll like this." Just about an hour ago, from someone saying, "Do you delete and block people who leave any negative comment?" And we responded, "Yeah, we do. We want an atmosphere of kindness. I want kindness in my life because again, you know what? I already know everything about second passports. I'm doing it myself. I'm getting like 6 second residence this year. I'm doing all kinds of new projects. I don't need to make videos to tell everyone else. So, what do I need negativity for? What does my team need negativity for? Delete, block. If that means we're hiding something, then so be it. Don't work with us. Don't watch our stuff, whatever. I think having a boundary, and that means you got to be good, by the way. We've got, we fill up the calendar every month because people want to work with us. And so if some guy who leaves negative comments doesn't want to be with us, then that's fine. But, for me, it's about having boundaries, and I'm happy to do that. And understand that everyone is going to try and manipulate you in those situations where they're going to try and make it sound like it's your fault. Right. You just have to know what the boundary is and what you're willing to accept. And for me, I've spent an entire lifetime in industries with people who are not kind. I worked in AM radio, at a high level, selling, multi-million-dollar, of airtime for infomercials. And I mean, AM radio is the lowest form of show business. These people, I mean, it's crabs in a bucket, like on steroids. And so at this point in my life, I just want kindness. And I want to set those boundaries. So I think that's important.
No, that definitely is. It definitely is. With, you talk about, going to these other countries, and my whole point is I want to have you talk about things that maybe you won't talk about on YouTube because people might say, oh, that sounds like bragging. I think that you're very aware of how things may sound, but it's not bragging to somebody who is winning, right? Or somebody who's living their best life. Because if people think, for me at least, the life isn't all about, it's not all about money. Surely don't have, $1 billion. So maybe if I did, I'd think differently of it, but I don't know if I'd be a nice person. So give it to me as I can take it. But you talk about, women, and we see men go to maybe Brazil and say, oh, I just want to go find women. They don't want to go find women. They want to go buy women. Can you talk about just how, because you talk about it in your book, women can be friendlier in other countries. And just what do you mean by that? I'd love to hear you speak on that.
Well, here's what people don't realize. I mean, everyone says, well, Andrew talks about tax and passports and all that. Andrew's a tax firm. And so here's the reality. Nobody wants to, hire a business to kvetch about how they can't date women in their country. And if they would, it's not a very profitable business, I imagine, that you're selling ebooks for $19 or something. So, I've gone where the best business opportunity is. We offer high level, tax and citizenship and immigration and that kind of advice. But at the beginning of that was me being in the United States and being a guy who, at 21, 22 years old was starting out to make, 6 figures. And, I have always acted older than my age, especially back then. And, I remember, a friend dragging me to a bar. And, there'd always be the girl like, yeah, like, why are you wearing like cufflinks? Like, what are you like a loser? Like, what's your problem? It's like, and at 21 or 22, I didn't have the confidence just to be like, great, like, what do you, who cares? Which then what would have interested them is to just be aloof to it. I internalized it all way too much. And so, the thing for me was when I started traveling, wow, like I just talked to that girl on the street, in Norway, and she was pretty nice, and there was none of that judgment that I felt. Now, if meeting women in Norway means you're looking to buy women, then that's cool. And it's another thing that people shame you for. They say, oh, you can't get laid in the United States. I don't know, maybe not, but what if you can get laid everywhere else?
Yeah.
Is it you or is it the United States? I mean, and by the way, obviously there's plenty of people who are successful in the dating game in the United States. I mean, for me, it was never a place I felt comfortable in. So when people say, oh, Andrew renounced his citizenship for financial reasons. Yeah, actually it was a country from my teenage years I didn't really feel an identity with. I didn't want to be American. I love it now. I don't have to say I'm an American. And so are there some fringe benefits? Sure. But where it all started. And so, it was funny. We had our last conference, doing our first live conference in a number of years. We had our last one in Cancun. There's 4 guys on the last night. It's myself and a friend of mine from Chicago and the 2 camera guys. And they ran into these 4 German women who were on vacation. And my friend from Chicago, like his jaw dropped when he saw how like the camera guys were meeting and getting along with some of these women. And he's like, their friends were like supporting them, like, hey, like, go do something, and he's like, that would never happen in Chicago. And so, again, this mindset that going and meeting a German woman is some kind of a traitor. I mean, listen, go where you're treated best. I mean, we're all entitled to have love and to be loved. And that's one of the things that I think is really important in what I do at Nomad Capitalist, because I think there are some people who are attracted to what we talk about as an escape mechanism because they're not happy in their life and they don't have that love. And they never fully pull the trigger on the strategies we talk about, because it's really not about strategies. It's about a feeling. Mm-hmm. For some people, the answer might just be go to Russia, go to Colombia, go to wherever, and find someone, go to Germany, wherever. Go to find that person who identifies with you. For me in my 20s, that was people in Europe.
Yeah. And I definitely wasn't saying you were doing that. You have a real relationship. We had just brought 30 people a few months ago to Kenya with an influencer. And one of the guys told me, hey, where are the women? We're at the Kapinski. They're all around. And he's like, no, I mean, to buy. And I said, let me bring you back. You're out of America, but this is not what we're going to do here. And so, and that's what I mean. And people do the same thing, Brazil, everywhere there's women, right? And I'm accused, mainly by my wife, of before her, dating old women. She's like, in college, before me, you're dating that, whatever.
Right. PhD
candidate. She was so old. I like people. I like that. That's how I grew up as well. My, be 9 and hanging out with, a 13, 15-year-old. That's just where we gauge. You don't mean to do it. It's just where you naturally fit. And you can be an oddball and a weirdo or wear cufflinks. That is so funny. But with that, how did you find the older crowd, or how do you find these high net worth people? Because I think there's like a correlation between how you find people you're naturally connected with.
Well, I think there's no magic formula, unfortunately. What I found is it has to be very organic. So I've accumulated, some friends in the United States over the years and who have been successful. I've met a lot of people through business. The big thing I have now at Nomad Capitalist is we've got, 10 million eyeballs a year between YouTube and blog, maybe a little bit more than that. And, at the longer we do it, and really the more that I talk about what I'm doing, the more that I show that I'm doing this stuff, people just come. And, they come to you. And I think so. I think the best way to do anything, to meet anybody, is just to be doing it. And if you want to meet women, if you want to meet men, be out there and be doing something that you love and show that passion about it. I once said when I was single, I like going to afternoon tea in different places, nice hotels. And I said, I was at the Majestic Hotel in Kuala Lumpur once. They've got a great afternoon tea. And I told a friend of mine, I said, I bet if you spend every Sunday here, every week, and you can see there's all these different groups of girls coming in for their whatever. I said, if you spent every Sunday here just talking to girls at afternoon tea that you love doing, you would do so much better in terms of dating than you would going to a bar every night if you hated doing that. And so I think, the thing that's probably brought me the most people is just being Nomad Capitalist and being out there and just showing that I'm doing stuff, because a lot of people, have kind of borrowed from us. They'll go to Tbilisi or they'll go to Montenegro. It's kind of funny to see these guys, go to the exact same places that I've talked about for years. But they're just kind of talking about it, generally speaking. They don't have 27 offshore bank accounts. They don't have companies all over the world. They don't have to say, and I'm not trying to, shame anyone for their own experience, but I'm saying, like, I think, I had a coach once, he said, winners can detect winners. So I guess the best thing is just be a winner, be competent at what you're doing, be the best at what you're doing, be out there and just, quietly be doing it. And I think you'll attract the people. It's not going to happen overnight. It's taken us 7 years of writing and videos and all that to get people at the level we're getting them at now. It's been a journey. It's been a progression. But I think that's been the biggest way for me in recent years.
And all the greats, the Seth Godwins, the Alan Weisses, the Andrew Hendersons, all say, similar things of tribes. You're finding your tribe, you're finding your place. But also, let me ask you, because I know Seth and Alan have talked about, the imposter syndrome. Do you ever get that? Because here you have people replicating what you're doing, but they're being imposters of you or trying to mimic what you've done. But do you ever feel like, I'm doing this, but am I really as good? Like, do you ever get that feeling as an entrepreneur?
I think there's times it's happened. It's an interesting question. One of the things I would add, by the way, to what I said earlier was the happier you are, I think the more you are like to meet people. When I first started this, I was a lot angrier because I was just leaving the US and I had that bad taste in my mouth. That's not going to attract people, we attracted a bunch of angry people now to where literally now it's just like we repel them. And I think that attracts successful people because successful people are not sitting around, angry. They're doing their next deal. The imposter syndrome hasn't been an issue. Listen, I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, I struggle with, self-confidence and feeling good about what you're doing because you're stuck in it. Now, what I've done is I've just had coaches and, therapists. I've done it all for years. And so I've been very focused on self-awareness and improving myself to work through a lot of that and to be much better today. But, for me, the issue in our industry is not that people replicate because, that's a form of flattery. I think that for me, the big thing, again, being that Midwestern kid, it's just about ethics. It's about your word is your bond. It's about, the golden rule. When people go out and they steal our slogan word for word, or they try and use my name to drive business, we push back against that. And that's not a popular thing to do these days. Everyone throws around, you've got to be transparent and everyone's allowed to rip you off. I don't believe that. I'm old school. Yeah. If you're going to steal my, trademarks and you're going to try and use it to, sell some kind of service, we're not going to allow that. And so I think the challenge in my industry is, again, it attracts a lot of people who are corner cutters. And that's the thing since 2012. I said, I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to be the only guy who uses my face, my name. I'm going to be as transparent as possible. You're never going to please everyone, but I'm going to share as much as I can. Here I am. I'm a real person. I'm not a caricature. Now I see some people in the industry starting to come out and show their face and that kind of thing. But we were the first ones to do it because I believed there was a better way to communicate with people on a big level than to be a corner cutter and to hide out and to run some kind of, kind of scammy little libertarian outfit where, you just try and, whatever you can get away with. I don't believe in that. And I think it's not a secret to success, trying to cut corners and just see what you can get away with.
Yes. And people might hear this and say, oh, well, okay, for tax reasons, for this, maybe, he found his wife overseas, or maybe it's this. I think they might think that it's just so easy to, uproot your life. And you, in your book, and I'm not going to say where, because I want them to go, read your book and go through your website. But it is easy in some places, as you put it, where maybe you need to put, $5,000 down in a bank account. But then there's places where, okay, money's not just going to answer your things. I don't care what the donation is. There's a process. You may have to stay here for a certain amount of time. And for someone who has freedom or wants to be a lot of places, that this country might not be good for you because they're going to want to, have you be here. And if you stay too long, they might start taxing you. If you stay 6 months, right, they might start taxing you. So it's not as easy as that. But one place or one continent, and you've touched on it, but I think you're going to make more videos in the future on Africa, because with the emerging markets and governments changing, and once we get these guys who are like 70 and up out of here in a lot of these places, Ethiopia to me is a place where, going through the whole country, you can see, okay, more young people, even their president. What is your, take? Because I'll get a lot of flack if I don't ask you an Africa question. What is your take in Africa? And, are there any surprises that you've learned as of recent of your last, thought or conversation?
Yeah, it's interesting. I made a video where I talked about, why I haven't been as focused on Africa. And part of it is, I talk about investing in pretty, in countries that are, European, Serbia, Montenegro. A lot of people freak out about that. And so, imagine if people can't go to, sometimes people push back on, Portugal. I had a friend who's from Australia. He said, we're taught just to invest in our own city. If you're from Sydney and you invest in Melbourne, it's like you're out on the skinny branches. You're really adventurous. So I said, if I can't get people to do that on a mass scale, and obviously we've driven thousands of people to go and invest in Georgia, by the way, or open bank accounts in Georgia, for example. But nevertheless, how am I going to get them to invest in Chad? I just talked recently about how I think Egypt is going to be an incredible value play. I think it's a fascinating place, Cairo in particular. I was talking to my Egyptian friend just this weekend about it. Some parts of Northern Africa, I think, have good deals. Some of them may be more for lifestyle investing and just spending time there. I think there are some interesting pockets, like, seaside villas kind of thing on the cheap. I think Cairo could be a great market. Rwanda has been very interesting to watch. Botswana, I think, is probably almost like it's too late in many situations. Zambia has been interesting, but I'm not sure about that yet. Ethiopia, I think you might have a point on that. So there are definitely some interesting markets. But, for me, obviously what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to guide people, where can they go and get something done? For me, it's all about action. Imperfect action trumps perfect inaction all the time. And, the challenge I think that's out there is, getting people to go and invest in Ethiopia on a broad level is challenging, but on a personal level, it fascinates me. And I think it's going to be something we're going to be doing in the next year.
Okay. And so it's the convincing. That is interesting. Botswana, I had a friend maybe 15 years ago. He begged me to give him a little amount of money to buy a house. He was, doing his thing. He's like, we'll manage everything. We'll get this. And I was just getting married around the time, or just, it was a rough situation, even in life. It was one of those. And I'm like, I could give you this money, but I'm not going to be going to Botswana anytime soon. I'm trying to deal with, real life and, being married or whatever. So, Botswana is one of those great places. But what do you think about places that might, be so cheap? Like, I know the Gambia you had mentioned, but West and Central Africa, sometimes even when there's a conflict, it's a great time to buy because nobody's interested.
Yeah, I do like that opportunity. It was interesting. I just read an article the other day about how some of the wealthier parts of Caracas are really coming back in Venezuela, and you might have missed your chance there. Iran obviously has a lot of issues politically and economically, but Tehran, you saw some people doing some good property deals. So I think that's an interesting part of the portfolio. I have had a couple people I've worked with who are from Africa, and they're all in, and they're making a fortune of running businesses all over Africa. What I love about emerging countries, and I guess frontier markets, in the case of Africa, is you can do the simplest of businesses. I've talked about some of the Eastern European countries I'm in. One guy actually took my advice. He's doing it in Serbia. Start a real estate website. There's 27 million of them in the United States, but there's 0 of them in many of the countries that I'm in, and you could get a lot of business. Imagine with all the people we've sent to Georgia, someone with a really sharp real estate website could have raked it in. and people have tried and given up. And so I think in Africa, it's the same thing. I've seen people, I had a guy he just runs a cement company. He's making millions. Cement in like Mozambique, I think it was. He's doing deals in Angola. But, for those frontier markets, if you're going to make the big money, you need to be there on the ground. You got to be watching it. I've got a friend who runs a website called Invest Asian. He runs a property fund in Cambodia. He lives in Thailand, but he's in Cambodia half the time, and he's got a local staff there helping him run the thing. You can't just be running it from the United States. You got to be there. So that's the challenge of the frontier market. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. And if I were, 19 years old, I'll tell you one quick story. In the radio business, Howard Stern once said that when he was a young DJ, every month or every week, every month in Radio and Records, there was an ad to be a DJ in Nome, Alaska. Anyone could do it. Like if you could show up sober to the radio, and I know radio, I mean, this is how desperate some of these small stations are. If you showed up sober, you're on the air because no one wants to move to Nome, Alaska. So if you're willing to do what no one else is willing to do and you're willing to move to Africa, I think, you could figure it out, but you got to be there.
And do you think that's changing? And again, I'm some would say maybe a dreamer, sometimes crazy, part-time crazy. I'll admit that. But even with my wife or other people, they'll say, well, in Africa, the power will go out. I said, okay, so let's put solar. Oh, okay. What about the water situation? We'll put the, big tubs, we'll collect our water. And then with the money situation, Africa, everybody has a cell phone now. And with, they're more advanced than the touchless. I mean, we were in the London a couple months ago with the whole family. We're trying to catch a bus. And I'm like, we can't catch a bus unless you have the touchless. So, in Africa's I think Africa is more inclined to that because here in America, people are like, what do you mean touchless, contactless, whatever? You just wave the thing. So I want to collect, and I have a business I'm working on this year. I just want to collect money like that. If you can't pay us like that, I don't want the money. I don't want your money because I want to be able to see and I want to be in the now, which might look like the future, but the technology is here now. So let's use it. So do you think those things will change? And if so, what is your prediction on where, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, as a guy who came from the radio business, when I started traveling, I mean, obviously when I was in the radio business, I knew it wasn't going to be a forever kind of thing. I mean, selling people and selling companies to host their own radio show and promote themselves. I mean, not exactly in the era of podcasts, a necessity. But, when I started traveling and you go to these emerging countries and, people, they're just starting to get some money. They skip the whole radio thing. People didn't own a radio, some of these people. And so they're just going right to listening to stuff on their phone. And so I think the same thing with banking. I mean, you're seeing fintechs and kind of mobile banking that's coming to Africa, and people are just skipping this idea of you go to the branch. That's out. And so they're just going to kind of skip some of the things that we've taken for granted. And so I think, what that does, I mean, for me, it's all about culture. Just because you're an emerging country or a frontier country doesn't mean that you're going to have the right culture to do this stuff. But there are a number of cultures, number of countries that have decided we're just going to do things right. We can build any infrastructure we want because we're starting out fresh. Georgia's been a great example of that. I mean, they were one of the leaders, one of the early adopters of contactless, for example. They have really advanced payment systems for paying anything there. It's so much easier than anywhere in the U.S. or Western Europe in the country of Georgia. And I think in Africa, they have some opportunities like that too. I mean, if the goal is we've got a clean slate, let's just get up to the best there is, that's fine. The biggest challenge that goes back to your comment about what your friends are saying is, if you're just gonna cross your arms across your chest and say, well, that's not how we do it, you're gonna fail. And if you're gonna have an excuse for everything, you're gonna fail. But again, it goes back to success is weird. Most people have excuses for everything. As a coach of mine said, lying is social lubricant of society. We all go around telling white lies to each other. I try not to, but the average person goes around, everything's a white lie. Someone makes them, oh, I'm sorry for the confusion. Or, I spent 2,000 nights at hotels, many of them at the Marriott hotels. I got a crash course in how corporate hotels work.
I saw that video.
They've got a script. They never They never admit anything. You and I could talk to them until we're on Mars, and they would never just be honest with you. Like, it's just lying is the social lubricant. Excuses are the social lubricant. Look, it's lonely at the top, but if you want to be successful, you can't make excuses.
That I laugh so hard at that video because I'm one of those. I might be too honest. That's why I got to get out of Seattle because things are just a little
probably not the best place.
Yeah, yeah. But I laugh.
Nice city, but
yeah, great city. But it's just when you're honest, you're honest. Even with my wife, she's like, "Well, you're not going to apologize." Well, I meant what I said. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but I meant what I said. And that's how I felt. And in psychology, you're entitled to your feelings. So, and that's all that you have, right?
Obviously, I think that some people take that too far, where it's just like, no, I'm not being insulting. I'm being direct. I mean, this is the thing that the guy said earlier today, was, oh, you can't take any mild criticism. Like, dude, your definition of mild and everyone else's definition of mild, I'm betting, is about 100 miles apart. So obviously, there's always a fine line with everything. But yeah, I mean, here's me. I just like to be surrounded by people who are doing the job, right? I mean, this is me. When I say I'm working 15 hours a day, it's not like I'm on Facebook half that time, right? I'm like, it's a solid 15 hours. And people say, oh, Andrew's a superhuman. No, just you're used to the paradigm of work starts at 9, but they don't care if you come in at 9:20, and then you make yourself coffee and go pee and do everything else, and you start at 10:03, and you kind of sluggishly scroll through emails and pick up the keyboard. Like, that's not going to get you there. And so again, if we bring it back to countries, where are countries just throwing out the gauntlet? I mean, if you look at how, and I keep mentioning Georgia as a great example, the president came in 2004, the whole police force and the whole country's fired. You're out because you guys are a bunch of corrupt, it's a den of thieves. You're all out. That's a pretty radical thing to do, but that's what you have to do if you want to make change. And most people in most countries aren't willing to do that.
And this one definitely isn't. I remember reading how someone had said, to be a police officer here, they think that you should be a teacher first, and every 5 years you go back and forth. So then you would understand, how to deal with, if you can deal with kids, you can definitely deal, and go back and forth to have that compassion. Those things would never happen here. Or you'd have a lot of, just it's a lot of fear of trying something different. And that's why I personally like being outside of the U.S. because you can try different things without it having an act of Congress. So, I look at your stuff and I'm like, this is right on, but I'm in your tribe of, I get it. Go where you're treated best. And, for one of my YouTubers, he gets so much flack now because he's pushed Africa. And it's mainly, well, it's a 50-50 because he has an audience of everyone, but people think it's a mainly Black audience. And, Black folk get mad. What do you mean go to Africa? And recently that's kind of shifted with Ghana. And then, white folks say, okay, you're going to go? We want to go with you. And it's like, okay, come. And then you have the white supremacists say, you guys are all leaving America? You can't leave America. You're like, wait, why can't we leave America? Because, and I'm sure, and I know you've gone through it because I've gone through your comments before they get deleted, and you get that same type of flack. So it's not a black, white, it's are you in the tribe?
Here's the thing about flack, right? I mean, I think that maybe 5 years ago, there was some semblance that this was real. Here's my message to anyone who's an entrepreneur or a creator. Everyone's getting flack. Everyone's getting, what our biggest flack is? About it's from people who want to claim they want to hire us, but actually don't. And then so we're like, hey, we're sorry, we can't help you. And then they go and complain that we didn't, because it's this thing, because the haters, they so want to tell you no. And if you tell them no first, hey, I'm sorry, we're at capacity, they can't deal with it. And so it's become so much and so prevalent that I think that anyone who's not in that tribe of haters just sees through it. I think that the imposter syndrome, it's easier to deal with these days if you keep that in mind. If you just understand everyone's getting hate. Everyone's getting, the most overused word in business is scam. Everything's a scam. Here's what a scam is. Someone takes your money and they run away. I watch them, these internet marketing guys. I don't envy them because they're selling stuff to every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants to start a business. And what do these guys do? They buy some ebook for $7. They don't become millionaires tomorrow and they go in, oh, it's a scam. It's the most overused word in it, but I think people are really, waking up to it. I'm very lucky because, I'm working with people who are at a very high level. And so I don't have to deal with some guy who, I just took his last $7 and now he's angry. But that's what I would say. I would say that, there's become a transparency now where there's so much of it, you don't have to worry, and you shouldn't worry.
You talk about those folks who say they want to hire you. I know as a consultant and PR.
I was about to until you put up this video. Okay, right.
Okay, so you get that push. You get it to where you think like maybe some people just want to see what the cost is, so then they can maybe try to really replicate what you're doing, so they can take this. Because I've seen that this is the same paperwork, and because the world is so big but it's so small, do you ever see that like this person just wants?
I get. The beautiful thing that we've done is we've got in the last year we've gone from about 4 people to about 23, 24 people now. And what the beautiful thing for me is the feeling of letting go. That's been probably my biggest flaw, is needing to be involved in too many small things. That's also something that holds you back. You have to trust people, and you have to have people who are competent. Those are, Dave Ramsey, EntreLeadership. Trust and competence. That's what you need to effectively delegate, and you have to delegate to grow. So I don't know who's doing some of this stuff or who's doing what. I mean, but I just think that if you're a creator, you can't get bogged down.
Okay. What is your community give back? I know you've talked about some of the charities, but is there something that maybe you've done in the past that sticks out or that you want to do in the future? Is something that we like to ask all of our guests.
Yeah. Well, one of the big things that I've personally been involved in the past, and we'll probably get it started here again in Kuala Lumpur. For me, I have a soft spot for animals, and so as I've traveled around the world, and especially in the places where I've called home for part of the year, I'm always traveling around. I'd like to take in wounded animals. I remember being in different cities at sometimes, and you'd find a cat on the street and it's in bad shape, and you look, where's the vet? And that's a situation where money can help. I remember finding different animals on the street, and the local shelter or whatever doesn't want to take them. It's like I'm leaving tomorrow, or I'm leaving in a week from now. Like, what if I donate $500? I mean, I'm sure you can take care of a cat with $500. Okay, sure, yeah, we'll do that. And then it feels really nice to see the animals being rehomed. And so I've done that partially with my team and partially on my own a bunch of times. The challenge for me is, I look at this, I kind of envy, I don't envy, but I respect what Bill Gates has done, where it was solid, nose to the grindstone business for a long time, and then phasing into philanthropy. I think that's something that you'll see me do. But, for me, it's very hard when I'm in business to do anything but business. I'm just either 24/7 or I'm not. It's very hard for me not to be walking around thinking about it. And so while I have done some of that stuff, I mean, for me, I like to go and scope out charities. I'll go and talk to them when I'm in their city, in Armenia or India or wherever, and I'll talk to them and I'll get a good vibe. And I'll make sure that they're not just like one of these charities where it's like totally anti-business. I mean, there was one charity I was looking at, they're doing a great job, but I said, like, I'd like to give you guys a bunch of money, but like, I'm not paying $45 for a child's coat. Yeah. Like, we can probably have some local people in the villages here make coats for a lot. Like, I'm not just going to give you money to waste. But so that's what I've done. I have not really been involved more other than vetting the charities, precisely because I'm 24/7. But I guess my goal that I haven't nailed down when it will be yet is to eventually, be more of the nomad citizen and talk about the causes that are important to me. I think the best way to do that is to become successful in business and, like a Bill Gates on a smaller level perhaps, but be successful in business to where you can retire, you can be set for life at the lifestyle that you want to live. But then you can also go out and do substantial giving. And so that's what I'm kind of accumulating, markers for in the future while I'm giving.
And that giving, I mean, I don't know if you've read the book Give Work, and where she basically talks about, going to Kenya, going to Kibera, and being able to hire people there to do kind of like making her own Fiverr. And, Layla did so much good. And I read that book, and right when I get to the end, find out she's dead, at before 40. And that she went to all these different places around the world to give work. And I know you have a global team, but we only have, and that's the deeper point I really want people to understand is you have this life to live. And, if it's all about you and your things and whatever brand of clothing you like, your life is very shallow. But giving work brings and allows another family to then go hire another family. And there's no feeling like that where you're not just supplying for one family, but that they are supplying for another. Like, to me, it's like, okay, for purposeful work, oh man, can I do this over and over and over? Because driving the Tesla is going to get, that autopilot I don't trust. And two, I'm really tired of driving, period. I want to chauffeur.
Oh, well, I haven't driven in years. I mean, here's what I will say, right? Listen, I like nice stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I like to dress a certain way. I mean, certainly in this t-shirt's not representative, but, I like to wear nice shoes. And so, I think, there's so much shame going on out there. It's like, why would you pay $1,000 for a pair of shoes? Well, I don't know. Why would you buy a $100,000 car that loses half of its value in the next 3 years? We all of our things we like to spend money on. I don't think depriving yourself. I think some of these kind of hustle and grind guys today are all about depriving yourself. Listen, if you're making money, don't deprive yourself. For me, though, on the other hand, I do agree with you in the sense of, I've reduced my tax rate to about 1% on a global level from the 40s when I was in the United States. And because of that, I think that was another psychological trigger to go out and make more money, because now you're not giving half of it away. So they can waste it. But with that, I think there is a certain covenant where it's like, all right, let me take some of that excess, enjoy it. Let me take some of it and save it for the future and creating a legacy for my future family. Let me also go out and hire more people in places where there are fewer opportunities and pay people well above what they would make anywhere else, and create opportunities in those countries. But also go out and give some of it. And so this is where I perhaps diverge from some folks in the industry, where certainly there are people. Let's be honest. There are people who are in the community of international tax planning and pay zero tax, who are selfish people, and they don't want to give to anybody. Now, listen, I think there are certain causes that probably aren't that worthy, but I do think there are certainly people who and causes that can benefit from intentional giving. I think that creating opportunities around the world for folks in a capitalistic way, but also helping folks. If someone's an orphan with a developmental disability, give them a job isn't the answer. And I think that's important.
Well, you guys have got the game. If we gave you too much, your head would explode. I can't wait to see, Andrew say, hey, I got this TV deal because I went to Cannes and I went to MIP, and, everybody wanted to, they gave me my Netflix special and all that, because this financial literacy is needed more than whatever is going on cable TV. And I have no clue, but, this is the world we live in. But I appreciate you for coming to give the game. Everyone, go to NOMADCAPITALIST.com. Get this book. Study the website. I mean, you gave so much. I mean, this is so much learning that you can read about. And if this really hits you, you guys will enjoy this. Make sure you subscribe to Andrew's channel, like, share, give this to somebody who they will enjoy this. I appreciate you, Andrew, for coming on.
I appreciate being with you and appreciate the invite and all the kind words. It's been fun.
Thank you. You guys, we're out.